Can you hear him now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We got you.
All right, everyone, let's begin with the sign that says we're all Christian. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh, gracious Lord, we come to you this evening mindful of your presence. And it is a presence that at times is easier to see, and at other times a little more difficult. We ask you to bless us with the ability to never give up looking for it. Looking for it in our world, in our relationships, in the people we love, and most especially within ourselves. We ask you to bless us with that. We ask you to bless this evening, Lord. Bless these three very, very good men who so graciously said yes to being here with us, to share their truth, to share their success and their struggles. Lord, help us to never take that for granted. For that is the Cursillo model that you so wonderfully exposed us to and gifted us. Help us to always be open to being who we are, sharing who we are, both our thoughts, our feelings, and the deep essence of who you call us to be. Help us and your Spirit to work through us. Help us to get out of the way so that we can touch the hearts of whoever we may. And this we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. So we're going to begin with the reading, as we always do. And this one's going to be the shortest one I've ever read to start one of these. It comes from Paul's letter to the Ephesians. It's chapter 6. Children, be obedient to your parents in the Lord. That is your duty. That first commandment has a promise attached to it. Honor your father and mother, and the promise is you will prosper and have a long life in the land. And parents, never drive your children to resentment, but in bringing them up, correct them and guide them as the Lord does us. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So I'd like to start off with a question to all three of you guys, and maybe you could begin, Conor, if you would. When did you make your weekend, and what did it do for you?
Thank you, Joe, for asking me to be here. First and foremost, I'm really humbled by it, and hopefully I can keep up with these guys that have been around a lot longer than I have as part of this wonderful community. I made my Cursillo in March of 2019, so a little over 2 years ago. I was class 230. It's a little bit difficult, actually, I think, to kind of articulate what the weekend did for me. It really was an extraordinary experience to see how it touched the people around me, and as a result of that, how profoundly it touched me. You know, I think I even mentioned that weekend that I've always been pretty deep in my faith. I was raised by a mother who was actually a nun before leaving the convent and meeting my dad. And so it's always been a big part of my life, and it really just expanded my faith deeply, and was also an incredible exercise in perspective, seeing what some of the gentlemen that were there that became like brothers after only a couple of days, what they were able to really break through and accomplish in such an incredible faith-based environment and through Christ was incredibly powerful to me.
Thanks so much, Conor. Jimmy, would you go next?
Yeah, sure. So I was on the Cursillo, I think it was in 1976. I think. So, yeah, it's so wild to think, right? So, yeah, what it did mean to me. I mean, I think it was it began the invitation to really the Castillo movement and the, you know, the challenges thereafter, and worked on team. And, you know, I think it really was formative for me in my spirituality, and challenging as well. And I think it really helped form how I wanted to live my life. And so I don't know what more you can say about that. And I also believe that it got me connected to some of the most important relationships in my life as well.
Thanks, Jimmy. Johnny?
I see you saved the oldest for last. Thank you, Joe. Being very discreet how you did that. I made my weekend, was called the Brooklyn Encounter back then. I made it in 1969 because I had to make a retreat to graduate from high school. And that's the only reason I went on it. And it changed my life. It introduced me to having a personal relationship with God, which is something that I didn't have before. It made me realize that I was called to do more than I had originally thought with my life, and to put my faith into action. And it's been a cornerstone for me that I've been able to build my life around. The principles that I learned at St. Paul's on my weekend. I was fortunate to go back a number of times to work on team and reinforce all those things. And I discovered new things about my faith. So it definitely has impacted my life and been a major part of my life ever since that weekend in May of 1969.
Thanks, Johnny. So since you did such a good job at that, I'm going to start you off with this. John and I know each other since I was 18 years old. And so, John, since I know you so well, I know that one of the things we spoke about is to have an opening statement about fatherhood. Maybe the qualities of a good father, however you want to make that statement. Would you get us off? And then I'll ask the other guys to do it as well.
Sure. My journey as a father has been different than some. I was in a married relationship with 3 children, and that relationship ended, and I became the sole custodial parent of the children. So I, raised my 3 kids myself for a long period of time, and they are now adult children. My youngest turned 40 this year. I have 5 grandchildren, so I'm further along on the fatherhood journey than some of the people I can see on the screen, especially you, Connor. Your beautiful girls and the pictures of them in the background are just really very touching. So when Joey asked me about being a father, there's certain things that come to my mind when I think about being a father, and realizations I've had over the years. I've always said the hardest part about being a parent is accepting that your children aren't all that you hope they would be. That's not easy to say. And I struggled with that at a certain point in my life. And I think at times I still do. I remember a very dramatic moment with my daughter, who we were having a lot of problems between the two of us. And she said to me, I know I'm probably not the daughter you wanted, but maybe you're not the father I wanted. And I said, wow, I hadn't thought about that. That's the reality of being a parent. And I think a hard acceptance that as much as we love our children and we have goals and hopes for them, they take a path that that they've chosen, that God has chosen for them, and it might not be what we've chosen for them. So I think that's the first thing I would say about being a parent, the hardest part of that. The second thing is with children, I think that as parents, we probably beat ourselves up a lot for things that don't turn out right. And I've said to other people, and I have to tell myself all the time, only take half the credit and only take half the blame. You had a role in some of it, you didn't have a role in all of it. And it's you can look back a lot and say I should have done things differently, but nobody was perfect. None of us have been given a course in parenting and a perfect model to follow. We all made mistakes along the way. I know I did. And then I look back on where my children are at, and I think that's accurate. What I said to other people, and I say to myself, half the credit, half the blame. And at my age, I think there are times that I'd like to think my role of being a parent is sort of my responsibilities at least are over. Like I've done my job. I've raised the kids, and I'm now heading playing the back nine, and and it sort of think that maybe that's behind me as much as it would be when you define what a parent is. And I'm reminded constantly. I was reminded a week ago. I was reminded this early this morning that it's a lifetime job. That is make a difference what age your children are. You still have to parent them, and you're still called on to parent them. So those are the three things that jump to my mind when I think about being a father and being a parent. And I don't know if other people can relate to that, but that's sort of what jumps to my mind.
Great. Thanks, Johnny, for getting us started. Conor, can I throw it over to you?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, John. You've kind of also scared me half to death having three little girls. So I'll start there. So I come at it from a little bit of a different perspective, obviously, because I'm pretty early in my journey. My daughters are 7, 9, and 11. So the first thing I think of is I really think of it as a gift. I'm still sort of in that stage, I suppose. But my wife and I are kind of still in a stage in our life where a lot of our friends and our family are still trying to have their own families. And so, seeing the struggles that so many people go through now to get pregnant and to be able to have children, you really come to realize what a gift it is. And I think that's kind of what I mean by that. We were blessed enough that it was never an issue for us. And I kind of think that maybe too many fathers allow themselves to view it as a burden when it gets challenging, which of course it inevitably, always will at certain times. So for me, I try to strive to constantly keep that at the forefront of my mind. I think I'm blessed to be able to have the challenges that I have as a father. Second, something kind of struck me when I was thinking about it is thinking about fatherhood and parenthood from the standpoint of, you're supposed to be teaching them, and oftentimes they really are teaching us, and I think there's something really profound to me about seeing life through the eyes of your children, especially when they're little, and how it teaches you remarkable perspective. As an example of that, my oldest daughter really struggles with self-doubt. She's also in the throes of puberty, so it's pretty understandable, I suppose, on some level. But and this may sound like a doting dad, but she's a beautiful kid. She's incredibly intelligent. She's really popular. Like she has, like the world is her oyster at 11 years old. She recently got nominated for this wonderful award at school that she came in second for, and like it really crushed her because she put all this work into it. After being nominated, and then we show up to her 5th grade graduation, and it turns out that the other really big award that they were giving away at school, she was also nominated for and won. It's the only kid in the whole school that was nominated for both and won one of the really big awards. And so Doreen and I afterwards, we're sitting there in tears, outside. It was about 180 degrees. It was like a graduation on the sun. And we're both crying, with pride for our little one. And you sort of sit there and think, how could this kid possibly question herself? How could she question her ability? How could she question how loved she is by her friends? Hopefully not by us, but by her friends, the stuff that kids go through. And of course, I kind of get this look from Doreen, and Joe will probably know where I'm going with this, that look that says, does this kind of sound familiar? And, so it was very striking to me, because I'm not one to kind of brag on myself, but I feel like I've done fairly well in life. I've got plenty of friends. I've got my health. I have 3 beautiful children. I've been successful, to a certain extent in business. I have a wife that's far too good for me on every level. Like, I'm doing okay. But as Joe can attest to, because we've spoken about it over the years, I can have crushing self-doubt. And so in this really interesting kind of paradoxical way, my daughter is teaching me how to deal with my self-doubt, because seeing it in her has inspired in me, like, this is a difficult part of your personality that you need to be able to deal with, so that you're setting the right example for her, so that she doesn't deal with what you're dealing with in your 40s. So I love that idea of, we're supposed to be teaching them, but they're really teaching us. And, lastly, I wanted to touch on my dad a little bit, and what he kind of taught me. We unfortunately lost him last summer. But one of the things that he always really instilled on us, and was probably most important, was how to lean on your faith to kind of deal with the challenges of life. One of the things he would say to me all the time, and when I was younger, it actually drive me nuts, because I'd call him with something that I thought was a big problem at the time, and he would just say, "Give it up to God, son." And I'd be like, "That's all you got, Dad?" Like, I was a kid. I wanted something really profound, not realizing how profound that was. And I was lucky enough that in one of our last conversations, I was really struggling with something, and kind of started to tear up and got choked up with him. And he said, "Listen to me." He said, "You're going to go from trial to trial in life. If you just give it up to God, you've already won." He said, "That's how you win in life." And so, that's something that I really, truly want to instill in my children. I wish I had realized it, earlier on. I mean, I'm glad that I've realized it. I'm still, young enough that it can have plenty of impact for a number of years, but I hope that they can realize it even earlier in life, because it just brings you peace through all of the challenges that life will throw at you. And, I remember, Joe, you said something to me once in regards to, we were talking about our faith, and you used this great line where you said, we were lucky enough to stand on the shoulders of giants as it pertained to our faith, and how we were brought up in our faith. And I really feel that deeply in regard to my father, and I can only hope that, my children one day feel that way in regard to me.
Thanks so much, Conor. Jimmy, this is a tough act to follow, these 2 gentlemen.
You're killing me. Why don't we just go to the Met game and call it a day? I think we covered the base. I thought about this, and how great for John to just right out of the gates throw himself out, and his vulnerability. It's what we do. It's what we do in love. And when I was thinking about relationships with dads, I thought I'd maybe missed the memo, because I was very reflective of my own father. And I do think that, as we think about our work, I find that there's always the holy invitation, right? What is God inviting me into? And I think of that great Eastern prayer that says, Lord, comfort me in my afflictions, afflict me in my comfort. Comfort me in my afflictions and afflict me in my comfort. That invitation, that challenge of intimacy and connection, right? And I think fatherhood is that deep, intimate relationship, and it isn't, right? It is those things. I work at Covenant House with homeless kids, and when Mother's Day comes, somebody runs out to the CVS and gets a couple of cards, and the kids send them out to their moms. We don't do that for Father's Day. We don't need to. There's no connection that they have to their dads. So my point on that is just that this is reverent. This is special. This is sacred. As Jesus teaches us this Abba thing, right? He invites us to this intimacy, this relationship with God that is real and profound. And I think in my own experience, my father an extraordinary man, and he too had a real what I've come to really understand as a Paschal mystery, right? That's our faith too, right? This idea of the dying and the rising. He was a very proud man. He was very loving. He was very kind. He was charismatic. He had it all, you know, and was a very spiritual man. And when he got into his early 40s, he had a Huntington's chorea and started to lose his mind and his physicality. And that was a real painful thing for him and painful for all of us, right? And so here is this, you know, this love relationship where he comforted me often by his strength. And he also afflicted me, if you will, and challenged me because of his own mental health and well-being. And isn't what it's all about, right? As they say in the Hokey Pokey, that's what it's all about, right? It's this intimacy, it's this connection. And what I find in fatherhood and the complexity of it, first, it's sacredness, right? As Jesus teaches us to call this deity Abba, Father, right? So this is something that's meaningful. And I see it in the kids at Covenant House. It's a huge void, and they are less because they do not have this love energy. So you hear Conor talk passionately with tears in his eyes about his daughter. You know, by the way, you're fine, brother, and so is she. You know, because the love is pouring out, and we trust in love. You know, and we see John, you know, with a child 40, still in the intimacy, the dying and the rising, right? The joy and the celebration and the disappointment. I thought if I could, I wrote a poem about my dad. I wanted to read it to you. And it really, my dad's dying and his life has really given me moments of deep reflection, because again, he was such this strength for me and also a suffering for me as I watched him diminish, and he became what I didn't want as a dad. And that was painful. And we're invited, I think, by God to what does this mean? I wrote this some time ago. It's called Behind the Tapestry of Things. And in the beginning, I talk about a little bit about this reflection that we're called to do, right? So they say the unreflected life is worth living. It says, in peering over peer, reflections are caught in around the tail seeking into myself and back to him, my dad. The wonderment of his stride holds me. The passionate cadence by which he tethered life is my yearning syncopation. I so wanted to be like my dad. Is my yearning syncopation. Was his longings mine, or had he found a soft centering among the muddling chores and the race to be more? My father was a spiritual man, and he came to a sense of peace. He got off the rat race, and he found peace among the muddling chores and the race to be more. Maybe he won or just gave up. Most likely both. There was a period in his dying and his sickness that he had to give it over to God. He couldn't fight it anymore. And so that was a real profound thing for me, in that he gave it. And that was, I think, something important that I'm still trying to learn, because I'm a control freak and I'm trying to let go. And my father taught me that he had to let go because of this illness. Maybe he won or just gave up. Most likely both. He never whispered the answer. Perhaps he left too soon, or perhaps not at all. He died as a young man, but he's still with me in my heart and in my reflection and my spiritual reflection on who I want to be as a dad. And I'm sure that I'm a pain in the ass to my kids, and hopefully in moments I'm a sense of joy and a place for them to rest.
Thank you so much, all three of you guys. Tommy, can we stop now, please? Can we end with a prayer? I don't know where we go. All right, Conor, I'm gonna ask you another question, and then we'll get into all of this in more depth. And anything you guys want to reflect on, feel free to. What qualities of your father do you wish you had more of, and what qualities of your father do you wish you had less of?
Jimmy, that was beautiful, by the way, just as a starting point. And I related to a lot of it, especially when you say, I wrote when you said comforted me often with his strength. My father had MS and fell apart physically as well. So that really hit home. Thank you for sharing that. The quality that I wish I had more of is really an easy one for me to answer, and it's his courage and strength. And it ties into his illness and his life story. As I just mentioned, he was diagnosed with MS when I was a little kid. I don't really remember him ever walking or moving normally. He was always kind of, even when I was really little, he always sort of lumbered around, and that just kind of disintegrated over time, to a cane, to a walker, to a wheelchair, to ultimately being bedridden before he passed. And through the course of his life, my dad married pretty young, had a lot of kids. I'm one of 7. He lost his first wife in 1978 when he had 5 children. And he was just about my age at the time. And when I think back I read something the other day, because as I mentioned, he recently passed away, and we were going through his house, and I read a resume that I found shortly after his first wife had passed. And it had his age on it, which is my age now. And it really hit me hard, where I thought, how could he have possibly survived a loss like that with 5 small children? Thank God he did, because he married my mom, and I didn't exist before that. So I was born, after that, he had myself and my younger sister. And just about 30 years after he lost his first wife to cancer, he lost my mom to cancer. And in the interim, lost his physical ability to walk through MS. And I never saw even the remotest sense of him feeling sorry for himself through it. He had the most incredible ability to just take whatever was thrown at him, lean on his faith, and just remain positive. And I still to this day don't really have a clue of how he did it. But it was incredible as a son, because, I'd call him feeling bad about, some utter nonsense in the grand scheme of things. And I'd call him for support, who was bedridden, had lost his wife, had lost his ability to walk, and was essentially alone at home. And he was the one that was giving me a pep talk. So that unflinching courage and rock solid faith is certainly what I wish I had more of. What I wish I had less of, I think I've probably inherited a little bit of his lack of patience. He was a really had strong opinions about almost everything, to the point of drive you crazy. I think I've probably inherited a little bit of that as well. I'm sure Doreen, I think she's slightly off screen, but would probably agree. And I probably have a little bit of his Irish temper as well. Although I will say I never saw it. He was, again, Jimmy, you really sort of hit home when you talked about what a loving and kind of tender, loving, big kind of bear my dad was. Like, even my friends couldn't get out of the house without giving Mr. Godfrey a hug. It was hilarious. He'd whistle at our friends trying to get out of the house. You don't leave this house until you give me a hug. So he was a teddy bear, but if you crossed him, he was a tough SOB. And that's probably gotten me in trouble a couple of times. I think I'm growing out of it a little bit, but that Irish temper can kind of get you sometimes. So those are I think the things that I'd probably want a little bit less of in his character traits.
Thanks, Conor. Jimmy, how about we go to you?
Jimmy, you're muted. Got it. I have a child in the building, so I muted. I think I said it. I mean, I think the thing that one of the characteristics that my dad had later on in life, it was a struggle. It didn't happen automatically, but with this, the trusting in God, that God holds him as he traveled to more suffering. A real connection to the cross, I think, and trusting that God holds him. So that's the positive part. The negative part, I think I have a lot of negatives, but I'm not sure. I think they come from my mother.
Nothing negative comes from your
But
mother.
nothing about my mother was negative. No, my mother was Mary Brady, and we have this thing called, oh, that was like a Brady. You just did a Brady thing, which usually has a bit of a bite at the end of it. But I don't know. I think the other thing too, and to be honest, and we're honest, we're brothers and sisters here. I think my father died, and you remember the good stuff, right? It's kind of funny how that is, but I guess I can be a procrastinator, and I think my dad was an intellectual, and so he was more of a philosopher at times than painting the garage, which my mother saw as a way in which she needed to be loved. So that was the dance there. So I think those are the two things I'd share, Joe.
Johnny?
Some of the qualities that I take from my father are, I think, fall in the qualities that I'm glad I took from him, and at the same time, I wish I didn't have. They seem to have the double-edged sword. He was very passionate about things that were important to him, and God knows I'm passionate about things that are important to me. Sometimes too passionate. He was a salesperson, and he was always selling, and I think that's a big part of my personality. And in some ways, that's a good thing, and sometimes I think it's a bad thing. It's too much. He's a crazy sports fan, and I'm a crazy sports fan, and but sometimes it's too crazy, as the people who I live with tell me. But one of the things that jumped to my mind when you were asking this question was something that my father was not, and because of that, I think I was. My father was not an affirmer. He would not tell me I did something well. He would not tell me he loved me. He would it would break my balls a lot, even as an adult, even as a father. He would gather my kids around and sort of make fun of me with them, and of course they loved that. It was hysterical. And sometimes I could laugh at that. Sometimes it was annoying. But I mean, he was always there for me. That was just his nature. I mean, I remember giving my graduation speech, and I gave a speech at my graduation, and it was kind of controversial. 1969, middle of the revolution. Get out of the way if you can't lend a hand, because the times they are changing. So I remember coming back after the graduation. So I said to him, "What'd you think?" He goes, "Pretty strong. I don't know." I'm like, damn it, you couldn't even tell me I did a good job in my graduation. And I went upstairs to change, and all the relatives were coming in, and I just could hear him say to everyone that came in, "You should have heard the speech he gave. It was so great." But he couldn't tell me that. And we were all gathered around his bed when he was dying, and my kids were there. I'm getting a little choked up on this. We're all telling him how much we love him. My grandchildren, his grandchildren, my children adored him. And they're telling him how much they love him. And my son, Jamie, turns to me and says, "Dad, he really does love you." As if I didn't know that. And it really, hit me really, really hard how that lack of affirmation came across to my sons. And they were future fathers at that time. Now they are fathers. And I think I learned from that as something that I wanted to be different with. I wanted to be an affirmer. I wanted to tell my children, and I work with a lot of children. I work in a school system. I want to be an affirmer. I want to tell people how good they are, how good they've done, how much God loves them, and how special they are. And I'm kind of proud of the fact that my sons are that type of father. They're big affirmers. they are constantly celebrating their kids, and they're finding the joy in that, not just a task like some fathers do. It's a task. Um, I went to the drugstore. I saw this father with this kid, and I shouldn't read into things, but I do. And I looked at this father to this kid, and I just felt like it was such a task for this father to be taking this kid to the store with him. And then I think about my own kids, and they celebrate the times they spend with their kids. They're always celebrating it, and they enjoy it so much. And it's such a great thing to see. So the whole trickle down effect from my father to me, to them as fathers, some good, some bad, and some learning from the not so good to make them good. So that's my thoughts.
Johnny, I'd like you to continue. I think this next set of questions follows from what you were saying. So go further on telling us a little more about your relationship with your kids, especially when you were raising them as a single parent. But how were you a good father, and how can you be, or could you have been a better father?
When I was raising the three kids by myself, quite honestly, at times it was just survival. It's like, folding laundry at 1:30 in the morning. It's like, it was like, running them. They were all active. They were all athletic. They were all involved in a lot of things. I had a job that was, asking a lot of me. Um, it was tough. Um, I try to, I try to find fun in things we did. Times, I probably lived a little above what I could even afford to do, but I pushed things so that we would still find joy in our lives, even though I knew it was tough. They didn't have their mom. It wasn't easy for them to grow up with just me. I didn't have all the motherly qualities that every child should experience from their mother. I could do some of those things. I couldn't do a lot of them. And so I think a lot of times I just look to have, to say, well, I can't do that, but we can still have fun with each other. We can do stuff that was enjoyable to them. And we found time to do that. And looking back, I look at some of the people and how they have had relationships with their children, and they seem to have had some very profound teaching moments where they were able to impart wisdom upon them. And I look back and I'm thinking, what the hell did I even teach these kids? And sometimes I don't know it. I don't remember that profound talk we had that was, I was able to give them all this wisdom. I think I should have had more of those, and I wish I did. I can't beat myself up totally, as some people remind me when they see my own sons and they say he had such a good model. I think they took some good qualities from me, and maybe they learned from my bad qualities. Maybe they learned from the areas that I didn't succeed in, which is good, because that's what I did with my dad. The areas he wasn't good at, I tried to be different than as a father, and maybe they've done that with me, because it looks like they're doing a really good job. So.
Yeah, and Johnny, I just want to say this. I think you've heard me say this before. I stole it from Father Jim Cooney, so you must have heard it as well, as Connor and Jimmy may have as being students at St. Francis. He used to say, you want to teach kids. You teach kids by what you say. You teach them better by what you do. You teach them best by who you are. And I really believe that's how your kids really developed into these wonderful fathers that they are. So with that said,
thank you. That's nice.
Let me jump to you, Jimmy. How are you a good father, and where can you be, or could you have been a better father?
I'm going to go get my son, or should I just
have him answer the question?
It's a tough, man. That tough one. I think I'm a good listener. You know, I think I'm a good listener, and I think I'm a cheerleader. You know, I also think, yeah, I think those are the two things I would say. I'm a listener and a cheerleader. And I try, you know, the kids these days where we are and, you know, living in the world that they're really hard on themselves. You know, I think Connor, looks like you're going to have to do a lot of wind blowing in the sails as well. And I think, so I think I'm pretty good at that. How could I be better? I think, I probably could have maybe given them more structure. Perhaps I was kind of, I thought it was really important to trust my children that they were going to be okay. And I think that criticalness by parents says, so I'm making this a positive. Ha ha! Look what I just did. But you know, I think that parents, as critical, I think that they send a message that you're not enough or you're not right. And I think early on it was pretty tight, pretty strict. But as they got older, I think I let the reins go. And I'm wondering sometimes if I didn't do that. And then structure. The other thing too that hurts me to this day is, as wonderful as my kids are, and they're 10 out of 10, I don't really think I did a great job of passing along the faith. You know, and everyone says, well, you know, they're good people. Yeah, no, I got that. You know, I understand, you know, of course, check the box. But I don't think I did a good job. And faith is such an important part of who I am in my life is. That's why I gotta have a talk with Jim Cooney in the heavens, because it is who I am. It is how I try to live my life. And I think that they don't really have that much in their life. So that pains me. And I think I didn't do a good job, you know, on that. It wasn't the church's responsibility to connect my kids to this faith tradition. It's not the schools. It's really the parents. And I have to give myself poor marks on that.
And I want to say a comment, Jim, and you know where this comes from. Sometimes when our kids can't find God, we have to trust that God will find them. Because otherwise we beat the crap out of ourselves. As you know, I have one son who does believe in God, and he's a wonderful, wonderful young man. But at least at this stage in his life, he doesn't believe that Jesus Christ was God. And he's struggling with that. Mm-hmm. That crushes me, because I'm like all three of you guys. I don't give a shit if he makes a penny in life, as long as he has that faith in his heart.
Yeah.
So it crushes me. And that's helped me. What I really do try to say, Lord, you find him. He's not mine. I'm going to give him to you. He's yours. You find him.
Yeah, I believe I'm with you there, Joey. And again, it's an invitation of faith. I just think that I could have done a better job, you know, and you gotta take reckoning with that, I think. I mean, is it my responsibility? I like what John said, half good, right? I'll take something from my brother John. But I do think that, you know, I probably could have been stronger with all of that conversation. I think I also have that ability to engage them, because I'm a good listener, to get into that intimacy. But I have to give myself bad marks on that. And yeah, it was a cultural uphill battle. I get that, but I think I could have done a better job.
You know what? I look at my own two sons who have become fathers, and when they were the ages of your sons, Jimmy, they had sort of were not actively practicing Catholics. I don't think they believed in God, but so what? It was sort of like, you know, that's where they were at. But when they became parents, it changed. And I think they saw that it was important that they introduce their children to God. And I think that help refocus their own relationship with God. And I now look at both of them having a good relationship with God, which I didn't see that as they were growing up at the age of your boys. So maybe parenting is the way God brings them back. And maybe then when they look at the parent they want to be, they then
Yeah.
see the believing father they had, and then they want to be that themselves.
Yeah. And Joe, how did you put it before? You said it far more eloquently than I will about, it's who you are as a person that ultimately kind of dictates, I mean, to me, is that not the ultimate example of, all you can do is show them through your example, right? I mean, I feel like I watched some of my brothers go through that, right, where they kind of strayed. I mean, even I kind of did to a certain extent in my early 20s. I mean, I think it's almost like I don't want to say a rite of passage. It just, I don't think it's something that can be forced, Jim. And I don't know if,
Yeah.
if it allows you to be more gentle with yourself about it, but ultimately, and I couldn't agree with you more, John, it's that example, and especially maybe it's something about becoming a father or a parent or getting to a certain stage in your life where you just say, dad was right. There's really something much more powerful to this. Maybe it's because life gets more difficult, right? I mean, life just is pretty darn, I don't know how old your kids are, Jim, but when you're in your early 20s, or you don't have the responsibilities that you have as a father, or a mortgage or a job that, you hate, and all the stresses that come with life, and you realize what a powerful thing it is to be able to lean on true faith and not just say, yeah, I believe in God. No, but like really have a faith that you can, go to in your most stressful, anxiety ridden moments and find peace. And once that clicks, I mean, that's kind of how it happened for me. Suddenly I woke up one day and I had 3 kids that I was responsible for, and a big mortgage that scared me to death, and, and a wife. And I was like, life gets harder. And that only cemented my faith, especially that thought that my dad always planted in me, which was give it up to God. Whatever the trials are, the burdens that you're feeling, just kind of lay it at his feet and say, please help me get through this, and I'll trust that whatever path that you have me on is the right path. And when I come out of a prayer like that and it starts my day in a peaceful way, it's so powerful to me. So I don't know if.
Well, I mean, I love my brothers taking me off the hook here a little bit. Like, they don't want me to.
Half the credit, half the blame.
Yeah, no, but I think that there is I feel that, and I'm a Franciscan really, and that's who kind of raised me. So Francis had this great thing where I preach the gospel every minute, every hour, every day. If you have to use words, so I'm with it. But I also do think that and look, it's life ain't over, man. I'm in the 6th inning. Yeah, John's on the back 9. By the way, Johnny, you're a little further on the course, but I'm not going to go there. But
I'm still looking for my ball on the 14th hole.
But you are putting at the final green, brother. But I'm on the 6th. I'm in the 6th inning, so I'm going to keep swinging at it and invite them into this conversation. So.
Listen, one other comment too, Jimmy, if I could, and then we'll move on. We'll go to Conor, if you will.
Yeah.
When you were talking about an uphill battle with the culture, I think it's fair for me to make this comment and then to not, fixate on it. Our young people are not attracted to our church. They're just not.
Yeah.
Our church doesn't speak to them. Our position on homosexuality pushes them away because every single one of our young people knows someone and loves someone who's a wonderful human being who's gay. Every single one of our young people. I can't tell you how many young people I talk to who cannot believe that the discrepancy we have in the power structure between men and women. And they want no part of a church where women can't be part of the power structure of the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Decision-making process in that church. So some of it is that. And I'll leave that there and we'll move on from there. So Conor, if you would, I'd love to hear from you. How are you a good father, and where can you be, or could you have been a better father?
I this is a difficult one for me to answer, maybe because I'm in the bottom half of the third inning, and as a
Yeah, you're in the back, brother.
yeah, and as a parent, I'm kind of in the bottom of the first or second, maybe. So I guess I'll maybe answer it from the standpoint of how I hope to be good. I hope to be good from the standpoint of just kind of loving the heck out of my kids unconditionally. I mean, a lot of the things that both John and Jim have said have struck me as like, oh, note that, like that's something that I want to, strive towards, being someone who compliments their children and builds them up and makes sure I acknowledge, their successes and, and especially in this world that is remarkably good at making everybody feel less than, right? And whether that's a function of social media or 24-hour news cycles or just who knows what it is. But the world is so good at making especially less than fully formed minds feel less than. So I view it as a big part of my job to just make sure they never question how much they're loved by their dad. And I think, look, the jury is still out on all that, which is why I think it's difficult for me to answer where I'm good as a father. But that's where I hope to be good as a father, and I hope to instill the faith in them to the extent that I can through my example. They do love going to church, which is kind of neat, and they remind us when we miss mass, which I'm afraid to admit in this group, but it's the truth. And what's the second half of the question? Where I hope to be better, or where I could be better? I think similarly difficult for me to answer in ways, but easier because we're all good at being hard on ourselves. Certainly from a patient's standpoint, again, I tend to, I work from home and they're around a lot and they're really good at making a lot of noise and they're really good at fighting with each other. And so, sometimes I probably use some choice language that Doreen doesn't approve of and I hear about, and I certainly wouldn't want my kids to use that kind of language. So, things like that, but they're really only just getting into their formative years. I mean, ask me this question in 10 years when they're 21, 19, and 17. I'm sure I could fill this hour with where I feel like I've fallen short, because little ones are pretty easy. We're starting. Doreen and I actually had a conversation today, about I got one going into middle school, and so they're kind of turning into a little woman, and things are getting more dramatic, and she's wants a lot of independence, and she's not a baby anymore. And so I just looked at her and said, it's gonna get harder. It's like it's
fasten your seatbelt, you're in for a rocky ride.
Yeah, exactly. It goes from, I've always sort of laughed at the adage that it goes from physically demanding when they're little, right? Because you don't get to sit down and you're cleaning diapers and you don't sleep, and you're worried about them bashing their head and you're chasing a kid everywhere, to emotionally and mentally difficult. And those are much bigger challenges, in my opinion, than the physical stuff. So yeah, check back with me in a few years, and I'm sure I'll be even grayer than I am already.
Well, that's a nice lead into Johnny. I'd like you to tackle this first. What about
the gray part?
What about your sons or daughter you find most challenging or difficult to love?
Yikes. Well, there's qualities on each of them that I find difficult to love. And that's sort of what I talked about before, that I think it's so hard about being a parent, is I want one of them to be so much more accepting of people than he is. He's sometimes can be so critical and, not give people the benefit of the doubt, and, highlight what's wrong with them. And actually, he said something to me. He was doing that about someone, and I offered a different way of looking at that person. And he said to me, great, Dad, God's really going to love you the way you look at things as compared to the way I do, and he said that kind of sarcastically, very sarcastically. But and I was thinking about, I wish he wasn't that way. I just really wish he wasn't that way. And he is, you know. My things about my daughter, we don't have enough time. She's definitely my challenge, biggest challenge. And with her, I've got to. It's easier to see what I don't like about her, and I have to remind myself what's good and what's um, lovable about her, because there are enough things that she does that drives me crazy. So that's a challenge. And you know um yeah, and the other one's got other issues too. I wish, so each of them are different. There's different qualities that
Well,
it's who they are,
let me
and we gotta love people, with the package. They don't have to like everything about them, but and I don't always like my kids, but I do love them. So
let me throw this one out to you then, John. What do you find most difficult as a father?
how much well, I'm in a little different situation than these two guys. Being the father of people who are a father, I bite my tongue a lot about things that I don't agree with how they're raising their children. I think they're great fathers, and their wives are great mothers, and they're doing a great job. But there are things that the way they're handling, I'm like, oh, no, no. And I read this book I think it's called Walking on Eggshells. Um, how you parent children who are parents. And there was a chapter on giving advice. And it was a very small chapter. And the chapter said, here's the major insight about giving advice to your children who are parents. Don't give it. They don't want it. They're not going to use it, and it's not going to do any good. Next chapter. And it was like, wow, they made their point. And those who know me, I'm a big advice giver. I'm big at telling you what you should have done. So I've got to really bite my tongue a lot with that. And that's very, very hard for me to do. And those who know me especially know from me how difficult that is. That's the hardest part.
Yeah. Jimmy, what do you find most difficult as a father?
I love being a father. I don't know. I think I was built for it. What do I find most difficult? I think it's recognizing that I have a lot less influence than I think I have. And coming to peace with that and going, yeah, like there's that great, we talked a little bit about, I don't know, it's called The Prophet. Remember that? You guys have read that. It's a little book. And there's a chat page in there where it talks about parenthood, that you pulled them from your quill and shot them, and they left, and now they're on their own, something like that. I don't know if you've ever read that, but
you don't own them. You are
you don't own them.
You're the bow that projects them, but you don't own them.
Yeah, so I think that's really kind of the what I call, the holy invitation. Every intimate relationship we have is an invitation. And many days it's a freaking invitation, right? And so for me, that freaking invitation at times is, the train's left the station, or I'm up in the mezzanine waving, and I don't have the influence. And that acceptance, I think, is sometimes, is a challenge, because you wanna the little things, and you think you can control. So get ready, Connor. I think John said, put your seatbelt on, is a good prescription, because it's a ride, and you don't have the hands on the wheels as much as you think, or you would like at times. And that's, it's their life to live. And so I think that time, Jerry, that's that's tough as a parent, because you want to save them, you want to protect them, you want to say, don't do that, please don't date that girl or guy, right? Or whatever. And the trade is going, baby. So you just have to, and again, I think that's the holy invitation to faith, that God holds them, and we have to rest in that. So I would say that's the toughest
Sure.
thing for me.
Jimmy, before I let you go, I want to ask this. As you often say, we suffer the sins of our fathers, and you have a very unique view because of your 35 years working in Covenant House.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that with the kids that obviously sometimes you wish they just didn't have a father, but some they have abusive fathers and worse. How do you get them to believe in the goodness of fatherhood, or the goodness of men, or believing in kindness and compassion?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joey. And as I have been doing this work forever, I don't think I answer that question. I try to focus on their own divinity and their own goodness, and to reflect on that. The healing that has to go on with the father for so many of our kids. Like, how do you heal from a void? A non-entity. How do you heal from that? And the answer to that is that you have to know about your own divinity, your own goodness. So it's really important that we reflect their goodness to them, and they get a sense of their own goodness. It is the sin of the father, but they don't have that to rest on. If you never saw a banana, I can't really turn you on to a banana. If you haven't had a father, I can't really tell you the void that you've missed. So it's really not the conversation of, for most of our kids, although some of our kids, their father was abusive. But again, that father healing is really not about the father, right? It's really all about, how do you, with this person who's in front of you, who's broken, right? Whose parents were supposed to love them, kind of fell apart for various reasons. And they're standing there in this life alone. And the way to try to help them to heal, if you will, or to move forward, is to really kind of, to know their own goodness. And that's a huge, huge challenge, because they don't have the mirror that many of our parents have held up to us of how we were loved. And even in our parents, I don't know what your parents' relationship was, and they probably made mistakes, and some of them might have had issues around all sorts of things, but you had them and they loved you as best they could. And I think we know that, even if some people deal with addiction, that your parents were doing the best they can. These kids don't have that reference. They don't have even that line to, my parents really care. Some of them fantasize about it, but so the answer to it is, there's no context to it. So it's really about your goodness and how resilient you are. And look how amazing you are, because you've walked through the streets, you lived on the streets, you've made it here, you've got a vision for yourself. Wow, most people wouldn't have made this. You are extraordinary. So that's the message. It is void of the father because they can't relate.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wish that was a different story, by the way,
No,
but it ain't.
Thank you for the richness of that. For the sake of time, I'm just going to jump to this question, if you're okay with that, Conor. This because I want to hear from all three of you on this. What has being a parent, what has been being a father done for your relationship with God? Conor, you want to go first?
Sure. I think it ties back to sort of a little bit what I was saying before about how it kind of brought a richness to my faith, because it really was such a miracle to be able to witness bringing life into the world, even though we clearly play a much smaller part in that than our wives do. But watching, I'll never ever forget watching my, all three of them be born, but really the first one more striking because you've never been through it. And then the fact that, my wife was able to completely sustain this human being's life. And it just was like, oh, okay, miracle of birth. Like you've heard it your whole life, right? Oh, it's the miracle of birth. And to watch it happen was just like earth shattering for me. And then as they've grown, and especially now that they're, becoming much more aware as they, sort of come into adolescence and kind of learn to think for themselves and all these things that they grow through, watching them, learn about faith and, receive communion and be at mass with us. And, I try to take a moment every time we're at mass, particularly after receiving communion, where I go into my own place and I pray, but I always try to sneak a little glance down the aisle and look at my, my 4 girls, including my wife, and to see, my littlest. I mean, even when she was 3 or 4 years old, she'd be on her knees. She was too small to even reach the pew to lean her arms on it. And she would kneel and pray, not only until other people would start to sit back. She would kneel and pray until the priest was standing up to say the closing prayer. And I was like, it was just so amazing to me to see. I didn't know where it came from. I mean, we brought her to church. We say our prayers with her every night and every morning and around dinner. But, how does that impact a 3-year-old? How does that sort of get in there? And my only reasoning for it was divinity. It was there because, the good Lord instilled it in her. And so to see that in my kids just really continues to add enormously to my faith. And so it's hard to compare to before, because I think it's changed so profoundly in the past 12 or so years since I've had children.
Thanks so much. Jimmy, you want to go next?
Let Johnny go. I want another minute on this.
All right.
Johnny?
I think the role of parenting, and I certainly felt the situation I was parenting within was way beyond my capabilities. And I had to turn so much over to God and ask for help. I remember, walking into situations or discussions that I knew I had to have, and not having the words, and saying, you got to speak through me. You got to speak through me, because I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do here. And I'm amazed how often God did speak through me and act through me. And what came out, I look back on and say, that couldn't have been just me. That just couldn't have been just me, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And so I think it's enabled me to feel God's presence, my dependency on God, but also the fact that God loves me and continues to work through me. And so that's what I take from it.
Thank you, Johnny. Jimmy?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I started too, I think that parenthood and this relationship that we have with our parents and our relationship with our children is as intimate as it gets. I think that's why, Jesus uses this Abba thing as he tries to teach us that there's an intimacy in this relationship with God. So it's as profound as it gets, right? I guess from my perspective, and the intimacy is messy. It is human. It is earthy, and there is a divinity in it as well. Back to the mystery of our faith. So yeah, for me, I think it's I used the prayer earlier, Lord, comfort me in my afflictions and afflict me in my comfort. Parenthood has been that for me. It's given me the connection and the intimacy and love. And it's really challenged me to rest in and trust in God, that God holds it all together, because having 4 kids, shit happens, right? And they grow. And so this constant invitation to faith and to trust. So it's been a really profound invitation for me by God to be in this intimacy, into this love relationship, and to be humbled by it, and to be mystified by its mystery. So I think, I think it's spiritually, it's kind of that invitation that, this is what God is all about, the rawness, the realness, the intimacy, and that constant invitation to faith. As parents, I don't know how people do it without faith. Could you imagine? I can't. Like, man, you're screwed. Because there's days you just got to go to your knees and go, okay, you got it. I'm out, turning it over. This is why I pray. This is what it's about. I think for me, and I think parenthood brings you to your knees, and that's a good place to be.
I cannot thank you 3 guys more. That you were all very, very powerful and so real. I really do believe that this whole series has been an opportunity for people to present to the community how God has touched them in many ways, and you guys just continue that. So I can't thank you enough. So we're going to end with a prayer. Tommy, you want to put the reading up? Jimmy, you were referring to the passage on children. It's titled by Cabran.
You got it.
We got it. We're going to read that, and then I'm going to ask you to do a closing prayer, and then we'll end with the song. Okay? So let's again take time to close our eyes and ask for God's presence.
Sorry, Joe, it's not behaving. Hold on one second.
I think I have it here if you don't.
It keeps dropping off. Hold on. Oh, okay.
All right, I have it, Tommy.
Sorry about that.
Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children, as living hours, are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. For even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. Jimmy, if you would, a closing prayer.
Lord, we thank you for this community, for this time together, for the time to open our hearts and to share and to be reflective with you in our inhalation and with you in our exhalation. We thank you and we trust you. We ask you to help us to be better lovers in the world, as children, as parents, as those people who we love and care about. Help us to be reflections of your love. Help us to bring about healing in the world. Let us trust in the power that you have and that you bring to the world. Let us rest in that together in this community of faith. How lucky are we to be called? How lucky are we to have you in our hearts and in our breath? Blessed are we. Amen.
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 And